You see that spot. You are standing in your garage under a single fluorescent light, and you are staring at a tiny orange bubble pushing up through the paint on your front fender, and your stomach drops because you know exactly what that means. That is not just a cosmetic blemish. That is iron oxide eating your car alive from the inside out, tunneling through the metal fibers of your body panel one microscopic layer at a time. And if you have ever dealt with rust before, you already know that what you can see on the surface is only about 10% of the total damage hiding underneath. The other 90% is already spreading through the pores of your steel right now while you are reading this, branching outward like roots under dry soil, and no amount of touch-up paint is going to stop it. So you go to the auto parts store, you spend $30 on a wire wheel attachment for your angle grinder. You put on a respirator because you are responsible and you know that metallic dust and rust particles are not something you want coating your lungs, and you spend 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon bent over a fender, grinding and grinding and grinding. Your arms are burning, the dust is covering every surface in your garage. Your eyes are watering even through your safety glasses because the particulate is so fine it finds a way through every seal. And after 2 hours of that punishment, you pull the grinder away and you look at the metal and you can still see it. Right there in the bottom of those tiny pits in the steel surface, the dark brown stain of deep corrosion is sitting there completely untouched, laughing at you, because a mechanical wire brush cannot physically reach inside those microscopic cavities no matter how hard you push. The geometry of corrosion is your enemy. Rust does not form in a flat sheet. It forms in a three-dimensional matrix of iron oxide crystals that penetrate downward into the grain structure of the metal itself. And you can grind the surface completely smooth, and the corrosion hidden inside those subsurface pores will just wick back up to the top within days, the moment moisture hits the bare metal. You have done nothing except waste an entire Saturday and fill your garage with toxic dust. And then you go back to the store and you see the shelf, the rust remover shelf, big bottles with aggressive industrial graphics, words like professional grade and heavy duty and maximum penetration printed in red and black. And you grab one because you are desperate. And the price tag says $25. And you think for $25 this thing had better dissolve. Rust down to clean shiny steel. You take it home. You spray it on. The instructions tell you to wait 20 minutes. You wait, you wipe it off. And sure enough, some of the orange is gone. But the paint around the rust spot is now dulled. There is a faint chalky ring where the chemical contacted your clear coat, and that ring is not coming back out because the acid concentration in that bottle was high enough to strip oxidized iron, but also high enough to begin chemically attacking the urethane and acrylic polymer chains in your clear coat at the same time. You have traded one problem for a slightly different, slightly worse problem. That is not a manufacturing accident. That is not a formula error that the engineers at those companies overlooked. That is exactly how the product was designed. Because if you permanently damage the clear coat around every rust spot you treat, you will need to buy their clear coat restorer next, and their paint sealant after that, and their surface prep compound after that. Welcome to the cycle. This is what 40 years of consolidated automotive chemical retail looks like when you trace the money. And today that cycle ends. Right here, right now, for every person watching this video. What you are about to see is sitting in your kitchen right now. Not at the auto parts store, not on some specialty chemistry website. Your kitchen, the thing that is going to dissolve the iron oxide matrix out of your car's steel pores, convert the rust into a water-soluble compound, and lift it completely away from your metal without touching your surrounding paint, is a $1 bottle of plain white vinegar and a pinch of table salt. That is the entire formula. That is the complete product. A mild acetic acid solution potentiated by sodium chloride, and when you understand what those two substances do to iron oxide at a molecular level, you will never buy a branded rust remover again, and more importantly, you will understand exactly why the companies selling you those branded rust removers have spent decades making sure you never found out about this. The chemistry here is not a folk remedy. It is not a garage myth or a social media trend. It is a well-documented electrochemical reaction that industrial chemists have understood for over a century. And the automotive chemical industry has built a multi-billion-dollar retail empire on the assumption that you will never look it up yourself. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now, not later, right now. Because what this channel does every single week is take the overpriced chemical products that major automotive retail corporations are selling to independent car owners, and we crack them open. We read the safety data sheets, we trace the active ingredients back to their raw material costs, and we show you exactly what those ingredients actually do to your car versus what the marketing material claims they do. The companies that sell you $25 rust remover in a spray bottle do not want you here. They spend millions of dollars annually on retail shelf placement and influencer partnerships, specifically to make sure that the information in this video stays buried under an avalanche of sponsored content. Subscribing is how you fight back. This community is not just watching videos. This community is building a collective knowledge base that the automotive chemical industry cannot buy its way out of. Hit that button. Let us get into the chemistry, because what happens when white vinegar meets salt on a rusted steel surface is genuinely one of the most elegant chemical reactions you will ever apply to your car. Rust is chemically identified as iron oxide, and the specific form you are dealing with on your car body panels is primarily Fe2O3, which is the reddish-brown compound that forms when iron atoms in your steel react with atmospheric oxygen in the presence of water. What makes rust so destructive and so resistant to mechanical removal is that it does not simply sit on top of your metal like a layer of dirt. Iron oxide forms a crystalline lattice structure that integrates directly into the grain boundaries of the underlying steel, which is why grinding only removes the visible surface layer while leaving corrosion embedded in the microscopic pits and channels below. Plain white vinegar is a 5% acetic acid solution, and acetic acid does react with iron oxide, but the reaction rate in plain vinegar is relatively slow because the passive surface layer of the rust resists acid penetration. The outer crust of an established rust formation has a partially protective character that slows the dissolution reaction significantly. This is the critical limitation of plain vinegar on its own, and it is the limitation that most people encounter when they try the vinegar trick and find it underwhelming. Here is where the salt changes everything completely. When you dissolve sodium chloride into the acetic acid solution, the sodium chloride dissociates completely into sodium ions and chloride ions. The chloride ions are the operative component in what chemists describe as halide-assisted dissolution of passive oxide films. The chloride ion has an extremely high affinity for iron, and it attacks the passivation layer on the rust surface through a process of competitive adsorption, essentially displacing the oxygen-containing compounds that give the rust crust its passive acid-resistant character. Once the chloride ions have broken down that passivation layer, the acetic acid molecules now have direct access to the reactive iron oxide matrix beneath, and the dissolution reaction accelerates dramatically. The acetic acid reacts with the iron oxide to produce iron acetate, which is a water-soluble compound, meaning the rust is not just being scraped away mechanically. It is being chemically converted into a form that dissolves into the liquid solution and lifts completely off the metal surface. The chloride ions in this process are acting as a catalyst and a penetrant simultaneously, forcing the acid deeper into the corrosion pits while continuously converting solid iron oxide into soluble iron salts that the liquid medium carries away. The result is a process that reaches the corrosion buried inside the microscopic texture of your steel surface, the corrosion that no wire wheel or sandpaper can physically access, and it converts that corrosion into a liquid that simply wipes away. What is left underneath is the original base steel, clean and corrosion-free, ready to be treated and protected. This is real chemistry. This is the mechanism. And this mechanism costs you exactly the price of a bottle of white vinegar and a pinch of salt from a cardboard box that has been sitting in your pantry since last Thanksgiving. Now, let us talk specifically about what the $25 heavy-duty rust stripping spray is actually selling you. Pull up the safety data sheet on any major brand of automotive rust remover, and buried in Section 3 Under hazardous ingredients, you will find one or more of the following: phosphoric acid, hydrochloric acid, oxalic acid, or hydrofluoric acid in certain extreme formulas. These are not mild acetic acids. Phosphoric acid at the concentrations used in commercial rust removers is aggressive enough to cause severe chemical burns on skin contact, and it requires full personal protective equipment for safe handling. More relevant to your car, phosphoric acid at working concentration does not discriminate between iron oxide and the surrounding surface chemistry of automotive paint. The acrylic urethane polymers that make up your clear coat are resistant to very dilute acids, but they are not resistant to the concentration required to dissolve embedded rust quickly. What happens when the overspray or the runoff from a commercial rust remover contacts your clear coat is a phenomenon called acid etching, where the acid molecules begin hydrolyzing the ester linkages in the polymer chains of your clear coat, creating a dull, hazy, permanently compromised surface that scatters light instead of reflecting it cleanly. You see this as a chalky white ring or a dull patch around every rust spot you treated. It is permanent without machine polishing, and severe cases require full panel repaints. The companies that make these products know this. The safety data sheet tells you to protect surrounding paint surfaces before application. But the marketing material shows a guy confidently spraying the product directly onto a panel with clean paint immediately adjacent to the rust spot, no masking, no protection, because masking tape on the demonstration takes too long and it makes the product look inconvenient. So they show you the fast, easy, careless application, and then they collect your $25. And 3 weeks later, when you see the dull, chalky ring around where you treated the rust, you do not connect it to the product because the instruction manual buried the warning in paragraph 7 of the application section, and the marketing video never mentioned it. That is not an oversight. That is architecture, and you just paid $25 to participate in it. Here is the exact protocol. Mix 1 cup of plain white vinegar with 2 tablespoons of coarse salt. Stir until the salt is completely dissolved in the vinegar. You want full dissolution so that the chloride ions are evenly distributed throughout the acetic acid solution at maximum concentration. Take a clean cotton cloth or a stack of paper towels and saturate it completely in the solution. You want the fabric wet enough that it will maintain contact with the rusted area without drying out during the treatment period. Lay the saturated cloth directly over the rusted metal surface and press it firmly into the contours of the panel so you have continuous wet contact with the entire affected area. Leave it in place for exactly 15 minutes. Do not go to 20 minutes. Do not go to 30 minutes thinking that more contact time means more rust removal, because the chloride ion activity at the base metal surface becomes increasingly aggressive after the iron oxide is fully dissolved, and you do not want prolonged chloride contact on freshly exposed bare steel. Set a timer for 15 minutes. When the timer goes off, remove the cloth. You will see the dark black-brown slurry of dissolved iron acetate on the surface of the cloth and on the treated metal. This black material is your rust. It has been converted from solid iron oxide into water-soluble iron compounds, and it is now sitting in a liquid film on your metal surface. Wipe it away with a clean, dry cloth using light pressure. Do not scrub. The conversion chemistry has already done the work, and scrubbing is unnecessary. Now the critical warning, and this is not optional, this is not a suggestion, this is the step that determines whether this treatment saves your car or accelerates its destruction. You must neutralize the treatment area immediately. Mix 2 tablespoons of baking soda into 1 cup of fresh water and stir until fully dissolved. Saturate a clean cloth in this solution and thoroughly wash the entire treated area and the surrounding metal. The chemistry behind this step is as important as the chemistry of the treatment itself. The chloride ions that made this protocol so effective, the same ions that broke down the passivation layer and allowed the acid to penetrate deeply, are still present on your metal surface after you wipe away the iron acetate slurry. Chloride ions on bare steel do not simply evaporate, they remain active, and on unprotected steel surface, they initiate an electrochemical corrosion process called chloride-induced pitting corrosion that is significantly more aggressive than normal atmospheric rust formation. If you skip the neutralization rinse and leave those chloride ions sitting in the freshly cleaned metal pores, you will see flash rust appear on that panel within hours, and the corrosion that follows will be deeper and faster progressing than the original rust you just removed. The baking soda solution is a mild alkaline wash, sodium bicarbonate in water, that neutralizes the residual acetic acid and chemically binds the chloride ions, converting them into inactive compounds and stopping their corrosive activity completely. After the baking soda wash, rinse with clean, fresh water, dry immediately and completely with a clean cloth, and apply a rust-inhibiting primer or a quality wax or sealant to the bare metal surface within 30 minutes to prevent atmospheric reoxidation before you get a protective coating down. That is the complete protocol. White vinegar, salt, 15 minutes, baking soda neutralization, dry, protect. Total material cost is under $1. Total working time is under 25 minutes, including the soak. And the result is clean base steel with corrosion fully removed from the surface and the pores. Let us be precise about the scope here, because this channel is built on accuracy, and the accuracy is what keeps this community ahead of the brands. This protocol excels at surface rust and shallow pit corrosion on body panels, undercarriage components, trim hardware, and any steel surface where iron oxide is formed, but the structural integrity of the metal is still intact. If you are looking at a panel where the rust has eaten completely through the steel and you can see daylight or flex the metal with finger pressure, you are dealing with structural corrosion that requires welding and panel replacement, and no chemical treatment on Earth is going to reverse that damage. The $25 spray is not going to fix it either. Neither is the $100 phosphoric acid gel that the shop wants to charge you labor to apply. At that point, the metal is gone and you need new metal. But for every rust spot that is still in the surface and shallow pit stage, which is the overwhelming majority of what you will find on a car that you are actively maintaining, this protocol will outperform every commercial rust remover on the shelf at a fraction of a percent of the cost. That is the honest scope. And an honest scope with verifiable results is more valuable to you than a marketing claim that overpromises and destroys your clear coat in the process. Here is the final picture. On one side of this comparison, you have a $25 spray bottle filled with aggressive phosphoric acid, manufactured at bulk chemical cost for a few cents worth of active ingredient, packaged in a bottle designed to look authoritative, placed at eye level on a retail shelf next to a shelf talker that uses the words professional grade and heavy duty, and when you use it on your car, it dissolves some of the visible rust while simultaneously etching the clear coat around the treatment area and leaving your car with a dull, permanent halo around every spot you touched. On the other side, you have white vinegar and salt. $1 sitting in your kitchen. A chloride-accelerated acetic acid dissolution protocol that converts surface and shallow pit iron oxide into water-soluble iron acetate, lifts it completely out of the metal's pores, and leaves clean base steel ready for protection without touching your surrounding paint chemistry because the acetic acid concentration is too mild to attack urethane clear coat polymers. The neutralization step costs you a pinch of baking soda and 60 seconds of effort. The entire process takes less than half an hour, and the result is cleaner metal than any $25 spray is going to give you, because the chemistry of chloride-assisted dissolution reaches into corrosion geometry that a surface spray simply cannot penetrate. That is the comparison. That is the reality. That is what $40 of kitchen supplies does to the premium rust removal market when you understand the chemistry well enough to stop letting the packaging make decisions for you. Share this video right now with someone who has a project car sitting in their driveway with a rust spot they have been staring at for months, or a daily driver with bubbling paint on the rear wheel arch that they keep telling themselves they will deal with next weekend. Send this to them today. Show them the protocol, show them the cost, show them what the chemistry actually does. Because the best way to drain power from a predatory retail machine is to make the information it is hiding completely free and completely impossible to suppress. This is how we do it. Share it now.